how do we learn to live from our place of meditation, from that place of stillness that's not affected by bad moods, anger, fear, greed, or anything else, that we encounter in ourselves and in the world? I think the answer is simple, but the application is not easy. To find and live from this place of stillness, we have to bring together both our meditation practice and the Buddhist precepts into everything that we do. And I think that, this can seem like a daunting prospect, especially if we're newer to the practice. So today, I will look at how we can approach the precepts from the angle of refraining, how anyone can put this into practice, regardless of whether they've taken the precepts, and finally, how as we deepen our practice, these precepts become our skin, flesh, bones, and marrow, as Dogen would say, and how we can learn to live from this place. So for the sake of those listening to this talk who are newer to our practice, I wanted to give a small introduction to the precepts. As many of you will know, in many parts of the Buddhist world, it's common for lay practitioners to take 5 and sometimes 8 precepts. In our Soto Zen tradition, we have 16 precepts, and the 16 precepts are taken by both lay and monastic practitioners in our tradition. And these begin with the 3 refuges, which are the fundamental commitments of a Buddhist. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. This is followed by the 3 pure precepts: cease from evil, do only good, and do good for others. And then finally the 10 great precepts: do not kill, do not steal, do not covet, do not say that which is untrue, do not sell the wine of delusion, do not speak against others, do not be proud of yourself and devalue others, do not be mean in giving either dharma or wealth, do not be angry, and do not defame the 3 treasures. And I think that sometimes this can seem like an overwhelming heap of do-nots. And I think what's interesting about the Buddhist precepts, and what some practitioners don't know or forget, is that in their full form, they're written out as, I undertake the vow, or I undertake the precept to refrain from killing, stealing, saying that which is untrue, etc. This is quite different from Christian morality, which is, thou shalt not. And I think that there's actually a really important distinction here. I think the big difference, or one of the big differences, is this recognition that we are volunteers in this practice. It's I undertake the vow to refrain from, and so on. It's up to us to choose whether we want to follow these teachings or not, and it's up to us to put the teachings into practice. And because Buddhists do not believe in a supreme God, but rather, something that is greater than ourselves, that we're all a part of, the great Dharmakaya, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it. So really, nobody's commanding us to keep these precepts. We undertake these vows to train ourselves to refrain from killing, stealing, etc. There's this recognition, that we have to train ourselves, that this process isn't instantaneous, hence the word train. And I think actually this is really a powerful thing, because sometimes it takes the consequences of acting unskillfully to show us what we shouldn't do again. And, when we study the precepts, they help to point out unskillful behavior that causes us to suffer, as well as other beings. So even though we have a list of sorts of things to watch out for, our list of, do-nots, we have to come to a place in our practice where we've internalized these precepts, where we know for ourselves what ceasing from evil means. Learning to refrain as a default is really a skill that develops through our meditation practice. So think back for a moment, anyone who in their lives has stolen something, driven while drunk, said something deliberately to hurt, looked down on another. I think we'll probably know that these actions, though they might have made sense at the time, do not bring us peace. Rather, the heart is at peace when it acts in accord with its true nature, and this true nature is the precepts. So as long as we see the precepts as something punitive, something outside of ourselves, we'll never really be able to take them fully on board. Acting in accord with the precepts, learning to refrain in everyday life, begins with a sort of internal listening. In her commentary on Great Master Dogen's Rules for Meditation, Reverend Master Ji writes, quote, "When a person has become good at meditating in this way, which is nothing other than sitting quietly as the rules for meditation state, he will find that he can hear the still small voice in other places." Of course, this means he, she, they, any pronoun. And if you've been meditating even for a short while, this still small voice, a voice I would say that doesn't insist, will show up at unexpected times. For example, when you're about to say something that you might regret, maybe to react in anger. So whereas in the past, the reaction, would have been immediate, bang, you say something you regret. But with time in daily sitting, you might notice, and I'm sure many of you have noticed, that there's now a split second before the thing comes out of your mouth. And if we're paying attention, of course, we notice there's now a split second where we can hear that internal prompting, that which is not affected by any of our moods and opinions, and we can refrain. The difficult part, of course, is in seeing that split second as it arises and not giving in to the impulse, refraining from acting on it. So when we begin to look at the precepts from the angle of refraining instead of just do not, we can begin to see the inherent compassion of the precepts, because refraining is compassion. I think sometimes to me, do not sounds very much like a command, almost like a judgment. And of course, it is useful because we know without doubt as Buddhists, we do not kill, for example. The compassion of coming at the precepts from the angle of refraining is this recognition that we are human. We make mistakes, and that we're undertaking this vow to teach ourselves to refrain from, saying that which is untrue, speaking against others, etc. Knowing, of course, that in the course of undertaking these vows, we do make mistakes and we break our vows. So I'll tell you a little story. When I was a child, I think I was 10 years old, some of my family became vegetarian, and, my 10-year-old self decided I would like to follow them. I was definitely given a choice on this matter. I remember my father asking me, one Thanksgiving, wouldn't you really like to have some turkey, along with me? And I was like, I wanted to have some turkey, but I decided actually not to do that. I didn't want to be different from my sisters and my mother in this, so I refrained. So in the beginning, I was a vegetarian at home because of my family, definitely. And then meanwhile at school, where nobody was watching me, each week we had hot dog day, and it would roll around on Wednesday. And for quite a while, each week I would continue to buy my hot dog. And this went on for a while. I never told anyone. And then at a certain point I stopped. And it was interesting because it ceased to be about others and about following what someone else had decided, and now, truly became my own choice. And I think in retrospect, this was actually a really good thing. I cheated, quote unquote, for a while, and I actually felt quite badly about it, hence not telling anyone what I was doing at school. But then was able to refrain on my own because it was good to do. Of course, I hadn't taken the precepts at the age of 10. It's not generally done. But I think a really good example of finding that, coming to that decision on my own. So in her commentary on Great Master Dogen's rules for meditation, Reverend Master Jiu, she continues on. She says, understand that none of the above can take place until the involvement and the noise of the human brain dies down. A person who is constantly chasing after his own thoughts and getting involved with them will be too busy to hear the Lord of the house! ! And I think this is one of the more difficult aspects of learning to listen to that still small voice, the voice of the eternal great compassion. Because it's actually so easy to get caught up in our views and opinions, not to mention the noise of everyday life in the 21st century. How much time do we spend in our heads going over what, someone said to us, or worrying about what may or may not happen? Again, this comes back to learning to refrain, even if we want to learn to live from this place, of stillness and compassion. I think when we turn for refuge to our worries, or Netflix even, or whatever else, when things are difficult, we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to be with whatever it is that's difficult. Maybe we said something hurtful, or our actions were unskillful, anything really that, we're chewing on at the moment. So when we immediately turn for refuge, to that default place in our minds or something outside of ourselves, any comfort, we might be missing the opportunity to take refuge in the three treasures of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. When we can begin to approach the events of everyday life from the angle of the precepts, from refraining, we undertake the vow to train ourselves to take refuge in the three treasures too. And I think if we want to hear the Lord of the house, as Reverend Master Jiu called it, we have to look at how we can gently, compassionately begin to apply the refraining to the noise of everyday life. And sometimes this means letting go of the noise repeatedly during the day and simply coming back to what we are doing. Whether that's our meditation or the meal that we're cooking or anything else. So I wanted to talk a little about some practical ways we can bring together our meditation and the precepts if we want to learn, to live from this place of unshakable stillness, this heart of compassion. First, I would say, no matter how long you've been practicing, even if you're just beginning, anyone can practice the precepts, whether or not you've taken them formally. There is no barrier to this. We just start exactly where we are. Next, I would say, begin by looking at your current meditation practice and ask yourself, is there room for growth here? Make an honest assessment. If you meditate each day, once a day in the mornings, are there any days where you might be able to meditate even for 5 minutes before going to bed, even if that means sitting on the edge of your bed? Or if you sit for 10 minutes in the morning, can you take it to 12 minutes or 15 minutes? Look for any skillful means you can find to bring formal meditation to your day every day, and even twice a day, even for those 5 minutes, if you can. Because really, having a firm daily foundation in formal meditation is crucial for this practice and critical if we want to be able to hear the still small voice. Especially if we want to dig deeper into the precepts and create less suffering for ourselves. One skillful way we can approach them is by delving into one precept each day. So throughout the day, we just try and keep in mind this precept, say for example, not being proud of ourselves and devaluing others. And just watch how the mind might jump to judgments in the course of the day. And every time we notice we're getting ready to break this precept or have broken it, we just try as best we can to let go, to not feed whatever it is, the pride or devaluation or greed or judgments, whatever's coming up. Because I think actually the more we learn to watch the mind and know what the mind is doing, the easier it becomes to recognize what's truly going on. my next suggestion is to put down the noise when we can throughout the day. This might mean turning off music, television, social media, or whatever our distraction of choice is. Believe me, even in a monastery, there are plenty of distractions one can find. So putting these things down when we can, and I don't mean this rigidly because there's a time and a place for those activities. And at the same time, this means looking carefully at how we chase after our own thoughts. Because as Reverend Master Yu put it, a person who is constantly chasing after his own thoughts and getting involved with them will be too busy to hear the Lord of the house. So, every time we notice that we're caught up in our thoughts, and maybe that's only a few times during the day, we're getting deep into our stories, or, we just try to bring our mind back to meditation, whether we're sitting formally or washing the dishes, it's actually exactly the same thing. We definitely, we don't need to take a $500 course in mindfulness for this. All we need to do is pay attention to what we're doing, and when the mind wanders, we bring it back. So when we approach the precepts from the angle of refraining, we see first of all that it puts the onus on us. It's up to us whether we put these teachings into practice. And if we find that we're having particular trouble with one or more of the precepts, it can be helpful to remind ourselves that we are undertaking the vow to learn to refrain from being angry, from speaking against others, from saying that which is untrue, etc., and that this can take time. I think the Buddhist precepts become our skin, flesh, bones, and marrow, as Dogen says, when we make them a part of us, a part of our daily practice. They become a part of us when we can learn to silence even a bit of the noise so that we may hear that still small voice and act in accord with our true nature, our heart of great compassion. I'd like to end by reading you a short poem from the Shobogenzo, from the chapter entitled Showaku Makusa, or Refrain from All Evil Whatsoever. The poem goes, "The Buddha of long ago said in verse, 'Refrain from all evil whatsoever, uphold and practice all that is good, and thereby you purify your own intentions. This is what all Buddhas teach.'"
Okay, so I'm going to add to what Reverend Valora's already said with my own version. And I don't feel like we can in any way exhaust the subject of compassion, precepts, meditation. I think all of us, if given half a chance, we could talk about it for a very long time. It's broad. It's a great resource. It's so rich. It's just something that can renew us, believe it or not, every single day, every single moment. We just have to take that into hand and do it. Test it out. So what I'm going to talk about, of course, is the precepts and meditation, but in my own kind of way. So here we go. I was reading a magazine article a while ago, and the very last sentence of it said something like, "We are our choices." And I went, oh, that is an interesting idea. And it was not about being following the precepts or meditating, but there was something about that very simple sentence which I thought, yeah, there's something there that I kept coming back to. So I decided to pick that up as an approach for following the precepts and practicing meditation. And so here we go. I find that if we criticize others, then guess what? We become a criticizer. If we treat others as they're not as good as we are, well, guess what? Then we become a belittler, or somebody that puts other people down. If we don't take responsibility for our actions, then we are like children. So we become what our choices are. if we remember to say something kind to somebody, what do we want? Then we become more of a kind person. Now that's a simple formula, and there is something there for us to look into, because we can make choices. Buddhism talks about choices over and over again as a way to find our way to walk the way of the Buddhists and the ancestors. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and maybe this afternoon we can explore these. What kind of a person do we want to be? Do we want to be a criticizer? Well, it's up to you. I don't, but I'm continuing to work on it. Or do we want to be kind? Yes, I'd like to be kind. I think that's a better way to go. And still, it's Reverend Astor bringing kindness and acting on kindness is still not the end of the story. It can still be fraught. I want to be kind so people like me. So that's a qualification. How can we be kind with an open heart? Now that's a better thought, and I wouldn't mind trying to practice that. And it's not like I'm going to be a totally kind person, because I'm human and I have brought my own karma into this life. However, if I start to act on that kindness with the thought of not being, or of being a kind person, well, that has merit, and it also has it has an effect. It has power, right? If I want to be a respected person, well, this is what I have found in my life. It's not like I work on respect for myself so much, but I work on respecting others, and that somehow has a reciprocal action, so that others start to respect me, even though I'm not really, manipulating it in that light. So there's something there that intrigues me. We are our choices, okay? So here's another question. Our choices are made on our values. So I ask you, and what are our values that our choices are made on? Okay, that's something to think about. And what value do we put on our values? When we see a nice, great big chocolate chip cookie that just came out of the oven that Reverend Valora has just made, that's tough. So what are our choices there, and what value do we place on our choices? Well, boy, those cookies look good. I don't know, However, we just do the best we can, and it's okay. And maybe that cookie was just the perfect thing to be kind to ourselves, But it's when we get greedy, like, I want the biggest one on the plate, and I'm going to get in line first, and I'm going to find that cookie that is just perfect, which is, you sit down and eat it, and I go, what was that big deal all about? Rather disappointing, actually. Another question is, what are our actions that are based on our values? And are they benefiting others? We can always use the precepts to help us guide ourselves through these kinds of decisions, and how to walk the Buddha's pathway, to take refuge in the Buddha, to take refuge in the Dharma, to take refuge in the Sangha. The Dalai Lama says that virtuous actions created through generosity and benefiting others, ethical conduct and fortitude are based on our ideas and choices of what we want to do. And I have a story that's rather, startling, but good, and it's true, and it's a current event. And this is not a political statement, even though it may sound like it is a political situation, but not, I heard it on the radio, just the last bit. And this is a story about fortitude and benefiting others. It's a current event, a true account from a news interview about the people in Myanmar demonstrating for their rights. A woman was asked, wasn't she afraid to keep demonstrating because demonstrators were being killed daily? You know, I think it's kind of on the news a lot now. This is a reality for a lot of people in that country. She replied, yes, I am afraid. And this is big. And she said it was more important for her not to have the current military regime in power for her children, the next generation. She did not want them to live under their control. This was more important to her than risking her life daily in demonstration. So it was not that she was being stupid, but that her life was important because she was out there demonstrating. And with that demonstration, maybe something would help her children out, would help the next generation out. That was a choice. That was a decision, benefiting others, and her fortitude in that situation is admirable. You know, I know we are not in that kind of situation, but it makes a really good point that that these decisions can actually affect our actions. And who's to say that was what her decision was a good or bad action? I'm not going there, but I feel like the generosity of her spirit is admirable, and I offer her merit, whoever she is. I have no idea even what her name was, but I do offer her merit. Let's see here. Now, getting back to the precepts that Reverend Valora has so well explained, I'm going to talk about them in a little bit of a different way. And this is from the Buddhist writings. It says in Brahma's Net, it is the essential nature of the 10 precepts to rein in and bring to a halt the 8 topsy-turvy views, which treat the nature of all things as separate from the immaculacy of the one path. So this is starting from the premise that we already are that one path, but we do, by our choices, our decisions, we actually separate the world out into the divisions that then turn into things like the 8 topsy-turvy views, which are elation and sorrow, fame and disgrace, gain and loss, praise and blame. So what we're doing by making the choices and following through with them is that we're actually already separating out those decisions, or that we're already separating out our true nature by taking those actions and making those decisions. Okay, so it's starting from the basis that all of us right now, just as we are already one on the pathway, but we do have the tendency to make choices and in our minds divide the world up into this is good, this I don't like, this is okay. And by doing that isn't a problem, but when we get too caught up in it and we believe in the reality of this is good and I don't think that was a good idea, there's a road we all go down, that's when the world starts to separate into an us and them. And I think most of us know that within our hearts, that we are doing that when we kind of cross a line. And I'm hoping this afternoon we can talk about experiences that we all go through that we're aware of that are not good. They aren't doing us any good, and they aren't doing other people any good. And here's a paragraph that illustrates what I just talked about. Let me keep track of time. This is from the scripture of Brahma's Net. I'll try to read this without blocking myself out. Okay. Within the senses of a sentient being arises true awareness, not yet divided into pain and pleasure. It is called the consciousness of sensation. When it becomes aware of pain and pleasure, this consciousness is spoken of in terms of the three sensations of pain, pleasure, and freedom from both. In other words, we possess the awareness of pain, of pleasure, and the freedom from both of those things, okay? This sentient being is constantly aware of feelings of attachments and abundance. He already craves his personal viewpoint, his non-Buddhist notions of appropriate behavior, and his dualistic sense of good and bad. So this, according to this paragraph, this is the default. We just gravitate towards comparing ourselves with others, appropriate behavior. We are social beings. We spend a lot of time with that sort of information. And I question, what are our values there? What are our choices? What are we doing there? Do we really want to divide the world up as much as we do? And of course, the all is one and the all is different is the reality. But I feel like we're a little carried away with the differences. And so how can we rein that back in just a little bit and have it so there's more of a balance between what we know in our hearts, that oneness that's already in existence, and our conscious choices of making decisions about this and that, okay, and following through with the actions of that. Now here's another twist to this, and that is that as we've all heard, Reverend Master Jiu in her journal, The Wild White Goose. I don't know how, it's amazing how much of a resource this is. Reverend Master Jiu was marching out of the temple at Sojiji because she'd had it. She said, I don't want to be here. People are just, they're mean to me. I can't handle it anymore. So she's marching out. She's ready to go, leave Sojiji. And she has a moment where she says, I could be wrong, right? Now, I see this not as I'm a bad person, I did this, maybe, this. What I see is that she was saying, I don't know. And she was willing to listen to it. I don't know. And what good is that? I don't know. Well, she said, I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't know what to do. In other words, her heart opened up so wide that she had an experience that has held her throughout her life as a resource for, I could be wrong. What else is there? And then she opened her heart, and guess what? She saw that she was that one heart that she had been searching for. And that held her throughout her life, and of course she had other experiences too. But I could be wrong. I don't know. That's not a bad place to be. And the precepts are so helpful when you say, I don't know what to do here. Then you can look at the precepts and say, well, am I ceasing from evil here? Am I doing wrong? Am I angry? It's not always so evident that what we're up to is what we think we're up to. In other words, the heart can teach us, as well as, the Buddhist scriptures and all the resource of Buddhism. So, let's see here. I am not going to talk a lot about meditation because I have been touching on it now and then, except I see our choices are actions, and our meditation is a time to be still. And physically, the surroundings, we don't want to be interrupted. We want to be quiet down, to be still. And this isn't a stillness where we're still and kind of elsewhere in our brain, right? So we're not still and thinking about this and that. These things occur, but it's being still in the present moment. because that is our true nature right there. If we can learn or trust or take refuge or trust the scriptures, that there is something else to us besides our choices and our outgoing, our outflowing. But there is a true heart. We all know this. We just have to balance it out more so that we're not so much externalizing everything that we seem to need as a press to do. Okay, so I think what I want to just leave it at that. I have Reverend Master Koten on a booklet on meditation. He says, in real meditation, we recognize our own causing of suffering, our own contribution to it. When the Buddha did this, when he was a child, he discovered a taste of peace and stillness. And that's what I think we can do, is get that taste of peace and stillness within us when we meditate, and then learn how to bring that out into daily life so it isn't like part of the activity, but it is actually, we start to kind of peel off the onion layers and realize that that's who we really are. Isn't that a nice idea? And so I challenge you all to check it out. Now I want to end with a nice poem from a book that is just one of my favorites at the moment. And it's a book called The First Free Women, Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns. And this is a poem that was written during the Buddha's time. So this 2,500 years ago. It's a nice poem. And the poem was written by a nun called Dantika. And the name of the poem is called The Elephant. Okay. While walking along the river after a long day meditating on Vulture Peak, I watched an elephant splashing its way out of the water and up the bank. "Hello, my friend," a man waiting there said, scratching the elephant behind the ear. "Did you have a good bath?" The elephant stretched out its leg. The man climbed up, and the two rode off like that, together. Seeing what had once been so wild, now a friend and companion to this good man, I took a seat under the nearest tree, and reached out a gentle hand to my own mind. Truly, I thought, this is why. Anyway, this is why I came to the woods. Thank you.
Thank you.